My name is Randy Yeager, as mentioned. I am the Senior Manager of the IT Data Centers for NetApp under Customer 1. I've been with NetApp over 13 years so far, and most of it's been in the data center or the capacity planning. So what I'm going to go over today is how we use the products in the NetApp data centers and really how it's kind of helped our whole environment be much more efficient, a smaller footprint, and what we gain out of it and why we use a lot of our products. So I'm going to get into that. All right. What we do in the data centers, we're responsible for delivering our strategy, the data center strategy, short-term, long-term, the direction that we're going to take the data center with respect to our infrastructure and our roadmaps, and we execute on those roadmaps to support our other business partners, our application teams. So why our strategy is important to us? Clearly, we need a solid strategy to promote our business growth. Without a good strategy, we just can't be as agile and flexible in the data center with new technologies or new applications. What we're also working on is we maximize the use of the space. So instead of having applications, hardware in the data center and living there forever and just growing this portfolio, we're really trying to maximize what we have in the data center and reduce any unnecessary rack space so that we're not paying for power and cooling. We have a very aggressive, what's called cloud first initiative, or a SaaS first, for any new applications or applications migrating that might be older. We might move those to a SaaS-based cloud. What that means is applications such as our ServiceNow. We're not a ServiceNow company, but it makes sense to have ServiceNow be outsourced. So that application is outsourced. As we look into more of the other applications, we'll put those into our private cloud, our Cloud One, or maybe even the public cloud if the application is deemed applicable for that. So we have an aggressive asset refresh, meaning we're recycling hardware every 36 to 42 months. It is pretty aggressive, but what that does, it does allow us to get newer technology in that might be smaller, more efficient, maybe more powerful. So we're able to support the new applications and the new technologies and retire those legacy systems that just don't make sense for the business anymore. And it also, within our data centers, it gives us the ability to showcase. It's like, hey, here's our data center, and look, we're really using our technology to run a $5.5 billion company. So it's a great showcase, and we do bring customers, partners, and salespeople into our data center and show them where it is. So what we have, our data centers pretty much have all of our technologies that we use. I'm going to go over a few of those. We have CDOT, All Flash, HCI, which is our holistic computing environment, FlexPod, which we use for certain workloads. And then I'm going to go over why our strategy products have really improved our data center environment. And I'll show you some statistics based on trending over the time. Any questions on that? And it's okay if you don't, but all right. So our strategy actually started a long time ago. This was not an overnight thing. We had our primary data centers, both production, sub-production, test stage environment, all in California, in our Sunnyvale data center and in our Sacramento co-location. Those are critical applications to the business. It's what you would consider a brick and mortar type data center. Then we've got our regional sites in Amsterdam, Bangalore, and Hong Kong for those latency sensitive applications where they have to be closer to our customers. So we first decided that, hey, you know what? We've got our production, our sub-production, all our eggs in all in one basket, and that's not a good plan. So we worked on deciding where we were going to put our sub-production environment. Our partners in our WPR or our facilities, we're building a new facility in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we carved out some space for our IT environment so that we could move those sub-production environments to a different, basically it's a different zone or availability area. So we've got them separated. We, at one time, actually, get into this, I got a question. Do we have any DCs in the UK? We did have one in London at one point, but we had an application that was our telecom. We actually consolidated that and rolled it into Amsterdam. So great question. We did have one. We just closed it back down after we consolidated the application. So what we did, we've got our sub-production environment spread across the US region. Well, during that, we also wanted to find out where is a better place for our production. If you're familiar with California, hopefully not too much, but the power, the cooling, it's a very expensive environment. Here in California, it was between 12 and 18 cents a kilowatt hour. And on a 2 to 3 megawatt load, that's a lot of money. Plus, Sacramento and Sunnyvale are in an earthquake zone. So we looked around and figured and looked in Utah, Arizona, multiple other places where it would be better to put our production environment. Because NetApp economizes, and I can go into that a little bit more, but what we do is we try to use our outside air for cooling. It saves us a lot of money. So we wanted to make sure that wherever our production site was going to be, it would be in one of those mild climates where we could economize or use outside air most of the time, and not just the big expensive cooling systems for our systems. So we chose, well, got a little ahead of myself. We started our sub-production migration. So during this production migration, we had then chose Hillsboro to bring our production systems up there. So during our sub-production migration, which lasted several years because it's not an overnight thing, as we were migrating, we brought up and stood up our Hillsboro data center. Now, NetApp's got a really good business practice of making sure that the power we're using is efficiently utilized within the data center. And that power utilization is called PUE. PUE basically means the power that's coming in off of the grid, how efficiently are you using that? As an example, a PUE of 2.0 means you're taking in twice as much power from the grid to support your IT load. You're spending twice as much money to power the IT load. So in Hillsboro and RTP, we have very low PUEs because we're able to economize. Again, economizing meaning we're just using fans to suck in the outside air. We run it through a lot of filters, and then we provide the equipment that cool air, and we're able to economize quite a bit. Hillsboro was also selected because of the lower cost of power, less than half to a third of the Bay Area or California costs. So it's a great, great location for us to start migrating our production. So now we've got all these data centers in our portfolio. So we're not going to keep them. We want to get rid of them. We're working on the sub-production migration out of Sunnyvale and Sacramento to RTP. But now, once we brought Hillsboro online, we started migrating our production systems. That was a little bit more challenging, but we were able to test our DR capabilities on some of the applications. We were able to remove some of the hardware that we wouldn't normally need, and we were able to upgrade and refresh that hardware during this move. Now, by 2015, we pretty much migrated everything into our Hillsboro data center. So we were able to shut down a complete data center in a colo location, expensive location, and now we've kind of got our environment set. Right about in here, somebody asked about the UK colo. During this whole phase, we were moving applications from London into Amsterdam, and we consolidated that data center and removed it from our portfolio. You notice that over in NB2 actually changed. During this time, we actually stood up a whole new site for our IT infrastructure. Gave it a better regional site. It was more designed similar to our Hillsboro facility in that we planned and implemented our cold aisle containment to really help the applications and the cost of running that facility. We kept that down. once we got the prod migrated, we were able to shut down Sunnyvale completely. So that was a huge win. We've kind of, up to now, we've been having multiple data centers running. So we were able to now consolidate and get to our primary data centers in the US. And at the same time, we looked at our other co-locations, one in Hong Kong, and said, hey, you know, we have the technology to reduce our space quite a bit. Why don't we work on that? So we reduced Hong Kong from a 20 rack colo down to a 6 rack colo. Right? So we're actually, about every 2 to 3 years, we're either eliminating, reducing, consolidating, or moving a data center, which is pretty aggressive. But you'll see the outcome from that here in a little bit. So now we've just got our 5 main sites left. Any questions? All right. Here's a slide I added to explain why we went to Hillsboro. It's a leased facility. It was specifically built for NetApp to support our critical IT load. So when we talk about our traditional data centers or colos, we call them managed hosting because those are the applications that are so critical, they kind of need white glove treatment. So if anything happens, we have people local that can handle that. Hillsboro was built with as much redundancy as possible, roughly a tier 3 with tier 4 capabilities, if you're familiar with that. Redundant power, redundant UPS, redundant grids. So you can see that the target PUE, basically how efficiently we were going to use this, was 1.3. We use a pressurized cold room, which is, it sounds fancy, and it is kind of fancy, but what it means is, if you can see in the upper picture, we've got vents on the top. So we actually have a raised ceiling and not a raised floor. The reason it's a raised ceiling is that's our plenum up there. And above on the roof is all of our units are either fan, they're considered DX units, but they economize or use fans only about 80% of the year because of the mild climate. So there's a question on there, what percentage of power savings have you saved by the migration? I have some, I'll show you the trending and I'll come to that and hopefully that'll answer your question because that was a huge savings. All right, so now we've got our production facility, we've got prod migration, it's a final piece of our initial strategy. We haven't stopped there. So what we have in front, what I'm displaying is our products in our IT environment. RTP and HTC are kind of our traditional data centers. We call those managed hosting sites. Within there, we've got private cloud that has StorageGrid, HCI, All Flash. But also, we've got all the other products. We've got AltaVault, we've got FlexPod, we have All Flash. Then, farther out, we still manage to use, or we use our Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud. So we're using our clouds with our own technology. As an example, NPS on the left there. NPS is a NetApp private storage. We've got that in a co-location that is close to a hyperscaler or multiple hyperscalers. So we can control the data, and then as the compute load varies, we can point the compute load to whatever makes sense. Now it's a very small footprint, but we're able to maintain and control the data within that. We have it in Ashburn because it's close to the hyperscalers. For our applications, we want within a 1 to 2 millisecond of those hyperscalers.
Hey, Randy.
Yep.
So I had a question that was in the chat also. What is the industry standard for data center efficiencies?
Great question. 10 years ago, the Green Grid came out and said, okay, to have an efficient data center, you're going to be 2.0, which means you're taking twice as much power from the grid to fulfill your IT load, which might be 1 megawatt. So you're pulling in 2 megawatts you're paying for, but you're only using 1 megawatt on the load. Later on, and now they've identified that a 1.7 PUE is an industry standard. So they're lowering it, and it's going to continue to decrease. So I said in Hillsboro, we have a 1.3 PUE, which means we're getting close to unity, meaning all the power coming in off the grid is going to the IT load. RTP has a 1.13, so far exceeds the industry standard. And that's considered the GDL1, first generation global dynamic lab. They've built a second one with a PUE of 1.03. It's amazing. So very efficient data centers using the power from the grid for the IT load. So did that answer your question, Dave?
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep, no problem. So I'm going to go over a couple of the products that have really helped our data centers, FlexPod and All Flash. We have, and we do use private cloud, HCI, AltaVault, storage grid in our environment, but I'm going to show you just a couple. Otherwise, we could probably spend all day on how these products are in our environment. Like I said, we've consolidated our data centers. We've got them down to a small footprint, but we don't stop there. We're continually using those technologies to reduce our footprint. We've deployed our hyperconverged infrastructure in our data center to support our Cloud One initiative. So that's going to be our next generation cloud within our data centers. We're using Flash to reduce space, power, and cooling, and you'll see the results of that. I've got visuals, and I've got trending over the last 5 years. And then we constantly, proactively refresh compute, network, and storage. Like I said, the asset lifecycle is critical to our needs so that we are able to deploy the most efficient hardware on a cycling program every 36 to 42 months. And then we have, we specially built, or we didn't specially, we built racks that would hold all the new hardware and equipment to right size it so that we would use all the power that was budgeted for the rack. We're using all the space, the power, the cooling, and all the connections that are required for that hardware. And then we continue to right size our primary data centers and regional colos. And I'm going to show you next what some of our benefits are and some of our estimated benefits.
Randy, can I ask you a quick question?
Yes, please do.
How has the cloud helped your data center footprint?
Great question. Back here, I mentioned that we're deploying all of our cool technologies and really helping our data center. So with our Cloud One initiative, our Cloud First initiative, and SaaS First, some of those applications that were in our larger data centers might not be there anymore. You know, we've put to the SaaS providers any application that's out of the box that we, NetApp, don't want to run. SharePoint, Office 365, ServiceNow, you know, those are a few of those. Then in the other private cloud that we're using, we've punted a lot of applications that might not have a large footprint, but we don't want to manage those on site. What that also helps us do is reduce the amount of hardware in our data center. Now we don't have to support that hardware. We don't have to manage licensing for the hardware. We don't have to depreciate the hardware. So as we push it out to the cloud, that's helping our footprint reduce even more.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. So the results so far that we've got, Hong Kong, again, reduced 63%. That's a huge one for anybody in a colo. And our IT spend was reduced by $460,000 a year, OpEx. So that's a big savings. And that should be really a key point for anybody looking at how to reduce their space. And I'll show you what we've done in RTP. RTP, the next one, we have worked on reducing that space. We have a portfolio of 357 racks in the IT portfolio. And you'll see how we've reduced the space using All Flash and our FlexPod environment. So we're looking at a huge space recapture. Although we own that site, that kind of leaves us available to do something else with that space if we need to. And then Hillsboro, we built Hillsboro on the idea that we were going to expand to multiple data sites here because Hillsboro is split up into 4 individual data centers. They just happen to have walls right next to each other. So we have only taken 2 of them, and we're not expanding, we're actually consolidating, and the newer technology is reducing our space even more. So we have the opportunity now to maybe remove another 50% of that and then pull back that spend and save between $1 and $2 million when our lease is up. All right. So the first product I'm going to talk about is FlexPod. FlexPod's it's just been tremendous for us. It gives us the virtualization ability that we need, and it separates our compute and our storage. So we don't have a large storage footprint for every VM or system that's running because we've got it's in its own cluster. I'm going to do a little comparison here for you guys to show you. In our environment, we chose Cisco UCS. On the left, it's a rack of, let's just call them enclosures or chassis. There's 7 chassis on the left, and within the chassis, there's 8 blades. Now those blades, they've got multiple sockets and a lot of cores. What I've attempted to do here is illustrate how 1/2 of a UCS environment for compute compares to the same amount standalone. So we've got 7 chassis on the left, 2,688 cores or the ability to compute, using 10 kilowatts of power in that rack. To get the same compute on the right are standalone servers, same type of horsepower, 2,800 cores, but it requires many more racks, a lot more space, and a lot more power. So that alone has helped us consolidate our compute footprint. Huge for us. And in the UCS and the FlexPod environment, it really depends on what workloads go in there versus an HCI environment. And that's being worked out more and more as we go forward. So our UCS is kind of our powerhouse workhorse for our day-to-day virtualization. Any questions or on that? All right. I'm going to go into All Flash. Now we've got All Flash that we're deploying and we've been deploying all year. As we deploy All Flash, we have to install the All Flash in certain areas so that we can migrate the application data over to these systems and then decommission the older systems, right? So All Flash, this is probably one of my favorite slides. This is a 14-to-1 rack consolidation. You get the same type of capacity, but with a much greater speed and capability of the All Flash systems. This is actually what was going on in RTP and goes on in all of our data centers when we consolidate. Those 14 controllers and 207 shells and all that stuff, that's a lot of power. On the right is AFF, their AFF 700 with 2 shells of SSD disk drives. So the rack on the right is only using about 7 kilowatts. So we've recovered 69 kilowatts and 13 racks by implementing this. Now, a customer in a colo, I would think that they would be like, why are we not doing this, right? Because as a data center manager, this has been phenomenal. I mean, just the footprint alone, and this is just one area. The footprint alone has been reduced by 93%. We've recovered all the excess space, the power savings of over 90%. This is kind of a dream come true for me as a data center manager, trying to manage space and capacity. One challenge that we had was our All Flash systems don't use a lot of power compared to a traditional clustered storage system. So we kind of wrestled with, do we put 1 per rack, 2 per rack, or whatever. Our racks support roughly 9 kilowatts on average per rack throughout the data center. When implementing SSDs and All Flash, that footprint and the power consumption is minuscule. Each system on the right uses around 2 kilowatts of power as compared to each system on the left, which might be a rack of 3, where they're running at about 6 kilowatts per rack for that system. I got a little into numbers there, sorry, but if you guys have questions, please just ask them out, and I'm happy to answer them. All right. The payoff. This is a top-down view of our RTP facility. This is actually real life. This is what we've been working with. What you're looking at is on the right, we have striped down is our storage environment. Anything in blue is storage, green is compute, and we've got small amount of network area also. Everything here is cold aisle containment. You can see the doors on both ends and the cold air in the gray. That's where we're feeding only the cold air. Over time, because of Flash and FlexPod and asset refresh, we look like this today. Imagine your customers going, if they had an environment like this in a colo, how much they're paying per rack, what they could do. We're not stopping here. Got great guys on our team, all the green. We're looking at consolidating that into HCI, FlexPod, or newer technology where we can remove some of that. By FY21, which is coming around the corner, we expect it to look like this. If this doesn't excite a data center manager that owns OpEx, this is a great conversation to have. This is all Flash and FlexPod. We've got so much space that we can reuse for other applications or other initiatives. It's half a data center. This is exciting. It's exciting to me. All right. I don't see any questions coming up. Does anybody have any questions on this? Okay. All right. This is a chart based on all the numbers and how much we're saving. Somebody asked earlier, well, how much did you save by migrating? Over the 3 major migrations, shutting down Sacramento, shutting down Sunnyvale, and consolidating Hong Kong, and getting out of London, our portfolio has reduced 1.5 megawatts, so 1,535 kilowatts. This chart basically goes, how much power is that in a day, a week, or a year? What's highlighted in yellow is our savings per year. This is based on moving to a facility that I put in there as a 1.5 PUE and a cost of 8 cents a kilowatt hour. Our year-over-year savings is 1.6 million based on those numbers, and we've removed roughly 9,400 metric tons of CO2 by not using that power. And it's similar to taking roughly 2,000 cars off the road. So green initiative, this is all NetApp. I've got some stuff up here that sample power savings. It actually goes to, I think it's the EPA's listing on how to calculate all this, but it comes down to kilowatt hours. So every year we're saving roughly 13,400,000 kilowatt hours, and that's where our savings comes from. Somebody asked me the savings on support. You know, I don't have that direct number, but we've removed roughly, if I remember right, 2,600 devices out of our portfolio. That's from physical servers, that's from multiple storage shelves. So you think about that, I mean, that's licensing, that's support, that's depreciation. I don't have that exact number, but I'm sure we could probably come up and figure out, you know, a cost saving analysis on that. All right, so I got another question, which is great. Are you able to show support cost savings by migrating to a smaller footprint and hardware? I'm going to show you what we saved next. And I hope this answers your question. I don't have the support costs because what I have is a group of managed service provider people that is a fixed cost for my group. And supporting the data center, we've had a few people leave, and as we ramp up, a few people come. So it's kind of a fixed cost on that part. But the back end, where our operations people support it, clearly a far fewer people supporting this. Thank you. And if that doesn't answer your question, please reach out to me. We'll work something out where I can help get you those numbers. All right. This is the payoff. What have we done? we were consuming 2.7 megawatts. And you know what? If you think about it, that's not too bad for nearly a $6 billion company on our IT load. But we're not just going to ride that out because that's a whole lot of cost. We're down to 1.1 megawatt. I mean, that's 57%, almost 60% global power reduction through shutting down Sacramento, shutting down Sunnyvale, and consolidating Hong Kong. How does our floor space look? Well, initially we had to add racks and space to do that, but you can see we've reduced that. We call it rack space. In the data center, every time you put something into a rack, it uses a rack space. We have large racks in our environment. So until everything is out of that rack's not clear or free like you saw in the RTP top down. So the rack space being reduced, that actually trends with how many racks we've removed from our portfolio. At the high end, we had 1,500 racks. We're down to 763 racks right now, and we see that going even lower. If we cut out half of the RTP data center, which would be, let's just say it's 180 racks, and we cut out one of the data halls, which is now 117 racks, we have such a small footprint for a $6 billion company. It's cool. Ideally, with HCI and FlexPod, we'll get down to maybe just a few racks. So when customers come in and they say, where's your data center? You know, it's like that rack. Ideally, it will be unimpressively impressive that we're running our company through our cloud technologies, our internal cloud, our partners with your cloud, and our own technology. So. All right. So just because we're consolidating doesn't mean we're losing capability. Our storage capacity has increased by over 300% while the power is going down. That's huge. Now, in that number is not just all flash, but that's also our storage grid, our solid fire, our E-series. We use just about everything here. Oh, and our HCI. So our storage capacity has gone through the roof. Physical servers have decreased by nearly 20%. That means we're getting rid of those things that take power, and we're virtualizing those. A server, even a 1U server, might be 200 to 300 watts. A virtual server on an ESX blade uses about 40 watts. Because when you virtualize, the more VMs you can virtualize in that FlexPod environment or HCI environment, the better you're utilizing the memory, but maybe not so much the CPU. But you do have the cores in there to support that compute. So we're reducing our footprint everywhere. Here's the payoff. I hope this answers your question. We're spending a little over $17 million a year in OpEx with our initial portfolio. Through all these consolidations and these closing of the data centers, we've reduced nearly $10 million a year, year over year, through all these efforts. And this is a great, I think this is awesome because this kind of really does tell the story, what we're using, how we're using it, and what we're getting back from it. And this is just us, IT. And we're probably similar to a lot of your enterprise clients out there. If they're running their own data centers, this is OpEx. If they're in a colo, that's expensive space, another OpEx opportunity. We're going to continue to reduce that space too by consolidating our Hillsboro data center, where that OpEx will come down even more. We'll look at giving back or reutilizing our other space in RTP, and maybe we'll consolidate some of our other regional sites to save money. We never stop looking at how to make our environment better. So our strategy is basically very simple. Cloud or SaaS first. If we don't want to own the application, let's get it out there. We're not the experts in some of these applications, but off the shelf, they're better. We'll host it in-house, basically in our traditional data centers, if we must. Now, we're going to have some critical applications that need that white glove treatment that will be in-house traditional data centers, but only those that have to be here will we house. We're constantly changing our data center environment. We don't build and leave alone for 10, 15 years. We do have a 5 to 10 year strategy, but that changes. So we have to adapt to that. And clearly, I'm hoping that you guys saw on those illustrations how our technology has really helped us in the data center environment really kind of squeeze that budget and save a lot of money for the IT environment. And we're constantly looking at how to improve our data centers, whether it's newer cabling, denser cabling, less cable. We're constantly redesigning our own internal infrastructure on that. And none of this is possible by just the data center. We are not a jack of all trades. We're a jack of many, but we require, our senior leadership's buy-in to this. We couldn't do a solid asset refresh on 36 to 42 months without that support. We have our business support, we've got our compute friends, we've got our storage friends. Everybody has to be part of this. So it is really kind of a big team effort and a great payoff, I think. Now, that's the end of what I have for the presentation. I had a few of those questions on the savings on support, which I don't necessarily have right now, and the cost of a smaller footprint. Did I answer those questions with what I showed? And simply yes or no, or maybe you can hit me up or like offline, that would be great. But if there's any other questions about our physical data centers and our portfolio, please feel free to ask.
Has anybody got any questions for Randy? It's Elias here. I've got one for you, Randy. It's a bit of a funny one anyway. It's more of a joke than a question. But have you considered, when you were moving your data centers in the US to areas where you had more cold air, have you considered moving them to the UK? I mean, the weather is miserable here. It's always raining and cold. And it would have saved millions.
Right. Well, we also have to consider if it gets too wet or if it gets too humid. So what happens in our environment is, honestly, in North Carolina, it gets humid and then it gets cold. It gets humid, it gets cold. So they're constantly using economization, right?
Right.
If we moved it out there, we have a large client base in the US for our products, right? We've got our corporate in Sunnyvale, and we've got our basically our big production operations in RTP. So we want to have these where we have a lot of people that can support them as needed. We do have I would say, a considerable footprint in Amsterdam, and that site is under our portfolio but managed by someone else. We're still looking at where we can operate better, right? So just picking up and moving to like a London or a Europe somewhere over there, yeah, we would probably have to build our own. It's a big cost to build a data center, and it's a big cost to run it in a co-location. And those are probably a lot of the concerns that your customers have. Your power's not cheap there. I worked for Exodus for about 4 years, and we built 22 data centers around the world, and we had quite a few there at like Telehouse or the Docklands. We were working with Colt. So London's definitely a great market, but we would have to review on the applications and the needs to build out there. But I get it. It's rainy and it's a mild climate.
No, it was just, trying to lighten the atmosphere and making people see that they can ask questions if they want to.
Oh, yeah.
There's a question there actually from Darren Penfold on the chat. Don't know if you can read it.
Can we run a green upgrade advisor tool that compares our current power consumption against new hardware? Funny you should ask. What we do in those numbers, and when I say what we do, what our data center team does, we manage capacity, power, and all the IT load. We use ServiceNow to record every piece of hardware we buy, everything from the power supplies, the power supply assumed consumption, because as you know, tech sheets are cool, but if it says you're running, that a system could maybe consume 5 kilowatts and you plug it in your environment and only uses 1, capacity planning is key. So we've got that huge database of every type of hardware. Now, The toughest thing is to say, okay, I remove one piece of hardware with this amount of compute and I put in this hardware with this amount of compute. What am I really saving? We do a comparison on hardware all the time. And we could probably pull up some models, or we call them CI, configuration items in ServiceNow, that does compare those consumption against our new hardware. Now, the new hardware is probably going to be, let's take, as an example, a blade for a blade center. All it is, it's a long blade that slides in and out of a chassis and adds compute to a UCS or a FlexPod environment. As the newer blades come online, we've got maybe a blade the initial blade had 2 sockets or 2 physical computers or compute, and then had maybe 16 cores per, right? So we had 32 cores to compute, and maybe it only had 128 gig of RAM. All right, so you're limited to the RAM and the compute for virtualization. Now, plug in the new generation where we can go up to 768 gigabyte of RAM, and maybe the cores are 26 cores per. Now we've got 52 cores to compute. Same footprint, same size, maybe a little bit more power. If you took an off-the-shelf item to compare it to that one blade, my guess is you're looking at something that's going to consume between 200 and 300 watts. While it doesn't sound like a lot, when you start adding those up, physical rack space, physical wiring, more licenses, more things to manage, it becomes quite a game. We do constantly compare, how does this new piece of hardware compare to what the other piece of hardware has? And we do that in ServiceNow from our CMDB. CMDB is basically our database of every asset we own. Did that answer your question on a green upgrade? We don't actually have a tool to do that. We were looking at a tool. We were working with some other companies, but I don't have that tool. I hope that kind of answered. We don't have a tool. That would have been the short answer. Sorry about the long answer.
Hey, Randy, this is Stan. I'm on the call, and I had heard the question about support.
Yeah.
I can provide a little bit of information here.
Can I tell them who you are, Stan?
Sure, yeah.
So Stan is my director. So when Stan talks, everybody listens, right? So Stan runs the customer one organization, and he's been part of this the whole time. So Stan, sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to let them know that you're kind of important.
Thank you, Randy. So when we were looking at our setting our data center strategy many years ago, not only were we looking to consolidate the data centers around the globe, but wondering how that was going to affect us with regards to a support model. So during that time, we had about 17 bodies that were managing our data centers for us. And they were set up in a way in which they worked 24/7, 365. When we started to migrate, consolidate, and reduce the data center footprint, we realized that it wasn't going to take as many bodies, so to speak, to manage that space. So during that time, we had about 17 bodies at about $110,000 per body, which was roughly about $1.8 million. As Randy and team did a fantastic job implementing the NetApp products and reducing the environment around the globe, we now run today with about 6 bodies, and I believe our costs are roughly about $400,000 a year. So a tremendous savings for us as we've introduced automation, as we've introduced virtualization and containerization throughout our infrastructure, operating on our own NetApp products, and then understanding that environment by management through way of our CMDB module. We are just way more efficient, and as you can see, we saved a tremendous amount of money from a supportability standpoint. And as Randy mentioned earlier, as we reduced the bodies and as we reduced the hardware, the maintenance costs associated with those particular products went down, close to 50% as well.
Thank you, Stan. Like I said, Stan's had that visibility for quite some time, so it was great to hear from him on that part to answer your guys' questions. I would rather not have any questions go unanswered.
Randy, I've got another question. It's a bit of a delicate one. It is from one of one of our SEs in the UK. It's to do with Active IQ, but I thought I'd introduce the question and explain the sensitivity of it, so you can answer it or not. But Naf, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, that's fine. Can you hear me, Randy?
Yes, I can.
Hi. So yeah, like I said, I'm Nav Saggy. I'm part of the SE team in the UK. It is a bit of a sensitive question, like you said. So yeah, if it's something you want to follow up with me afterwards, that's fine. But the NetApp kit that we've got, is it possible? Is there a way we can view that kit via Active IQ, or is it completely locked down so we can't see it?
I would not have that direct answer for you. I don't know when you're talking kit and all that. I don't have that information, but we can certainly dig into it because we are working on implementing or expanding the Active IQ into our NPS site. So this is something that maybe not we can work on offline to make sure that you get the answer you want, and you can see how we're implementing it within IT. So this is probably a perfect time to ask that question, but offline would probably be ideal. So you get the right information.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. No problem. Thank you, Randy.
Yeah, no worries.
I think the question is, I'm not sure if the reason why you're asking now, but is it maybe to do with similar to this presentation that we're offering to our partners and they can see how we work, but like is it with a prospect of showing as well how we manage things internally? Is that your reason for asking the question?
Yeah, I thought it'd be good, we could use it as a bit of a reference case, for customers when we're speaking to them. Also, potentially even as a bit of a customer demo. We could say, this is NetApp's, these are the systems that actually run NetApp applications, and you can see sort of, the features and not the features, but like the efficiencies we're getting, the performance that it's running at. You could use it sort of for demo purposes of Active IQ. Just thinking of it from a slightly different angle.
Sure, and those are all valid questions because we too in the data center are starting to realize that, hey, this Active IQ is really a thing, and it's going to be phenomenal for us. It's going to reduce our footprint even more. So Nav and Elijah, I'd say that we could probably get the people together to help answer that question directly and give you maybe an expanded, broader view of Active IQ.
Yeah, this is Stan Cox again. So that's being managed by Anita Jindal. But just from a high level perspective, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're asking sort of how that setup is. And what Active IQ does today is it takes advantage of our NetApp private storage, which sits in a Equinix co-location in the United States, out of the state of Virginia. So what it does is it takes advantage of our NetApp private storage, interconnecting to the AWS compute nodes, and they're also in the process of integrating NetApp cloud volumes as well. So not only is it using the NetApp private storage out of the colo, but it also takes advantage of it as it connects into my auto support, which is the ASAP Hadoop clusters and the new data lake that they built. So it's a combination of being on-prem, off-prem, and then taking advantage of the public cloud offering. And as Randy had mentioned, we can get you with Anita Jindal and their organization so that you can actually see. They got a pretty nice diagram and architectural overview of how it's built and how it's delivered.
Are you all done now, Randy? Yeah. Anything else you want to add?
I am. I'm all done. Obviously, I'm available for any offline questions or questions you might not have thought about today. Anything in the physical realm, but that's all I have for today on our data centers and how we're using our products in the environment to help our data centers.
Thank you very much, Randy and Stan and Mary Jo for organizing this call.